Transcribing is something that got brought up a lot during my time at music school. During my undergrad at Berkeley, a transcription was due at the end of every semester where we'd also get tested on chords and scales, etc. Scales, arpeggios, chords all felt like a roadmap, telling the player where it was logically possible to go. Transcribing felt like something else. Transcribing solos from Eric Johnson, Eric Clapton, Derek Trucks certainly expanded my vocabulary and knowledge of pentatonic scales. But more importantly, playing their solos over and over felt much more musical and interesting than running scales over and over, which, in full disclosure, I also did. It seemed like the difference between talking about something and actually doing that thing. It's like taking a writing class that helps you describe sprinting a mile using your senses. You see the finish line creep up. You feel the wind against your face cooling you off. You pass people having conversations and hear their voices get louder as you approach and then fade into the wind behind you. That all almost sounds romantic, but I assure you, try sprinting a mile, it does not feel romantic. If you like what you see here today, please comment, like, subscribe. I really appreciate it. It really helps the channel. Also check the description for Instagram, Patreon, and Twitch links if you want to see some of my other content. So what was going on when I was playing back the solos of those guitarists I transcribed? It was all of the exercises and concepts I was working on being put to use musically. It's very easy to get lost in the theory, the rudiments, the exercises, and forget that you're really just trying to get better at playing music. During that stage of my development, transcriptions didn't tell me about guitar and music. It showed me what I could musically do with my guitar. Something that gets brought up almost immediately when talking about transcribing is not wanting to lose your own voice along the way and not wanting to become a copy of your heroes. The idea is that if I transcribed way too many Eric Johnson solos, best case scenario, I'd sound like a copy of Eric. Worst case, I'd sound like a bad copy of Eric. For any musician who would love an original sound on their instrument, this sounds a bit like being in a creative prison where they built the walls themselves. There are certain points, though, that don't get talked about as much that should quell those fears. When you hear Eric Gales and Joe Bonamassa, do you hear Eric Johnson? When you hear Eddie Van Halen, Joe Satriani, or Tim Miller, do you hear Alan Holdsworth? When you hear Steve Vai or Mark Lettieri, do you hear Jeff Beck? When you hear any blues guitarist from the last 3 decades, do you hear Stevie Ray Vaughan? You're only at risk of becoming a copy of your hero if you only transcribe and only listen to that hero and then get all of the same gear as that hero and try to sound like them. If you have any other musical heroes or any of your own musical curiosities from your playing experience, then there's no reason to worry about being a copy. Steve Vai and Mark Lettieri were both hugely influenced by Jeff Beck, but do you think Steve Vai and Mark Lettieri sound the same? Of course not. Steve Vai would be a mixture of Jeff Beck, Van Halen, all of the 80s, Stravinsky, Zappa, and plenty of other things that make him Vai. Mark Lettieri would be a mixture of Jeff Beck and then neo-soul, gospel, jazz, funk, his fascination with bassists, and all of that would make him who he is. Can you hear the Jeff Beck influence in both of their playing? Yes. Do they sound like copies? No. There's also something I might call creative transcribing. It's almost like your hero would be passing the baton along to you. It's taking some of your favorite trademark ideas from your hero and expanding upon them. When someone like Eric Johnson gets brought up, at least in guitar circles almost immediately after that, someone will mention pentatonic licks and groupings of 5. He does do that a lot. I could simply learn a handful of his solos that have those ideas and repeat the licks. Or I could learn a couple of his licks and go, okay, descending ideas in groups of 5 sound like this when he does it. How far can I take the idea of descending ideas in groups of 5? I could simplify it and not worry about if things are descending or ascending and just stick to groupings of 5. After that, I could explore all kinds of odd groupings and mixing and matching them with even groupings. Now I have a lot of exploring to do. Using Eric's initial descending pentatonic ideas in groups of 5 as inspiration to start a journey, instead of seeing it as the end to a journey. Is transcribing worth it? I think so, especially at certain stages of your playing. I'm not sure it would make the difference between a good player and a great player, but it certainly won't hurt. For me personally, it was a super helpful learning tool. I also got a lot from that creative transcribing I just mentioned, although that happened at a later stage of my playing. But from what I recall, Julian Lage has mentioned not transcribing a lot, and that certainly hasn't kept him from being great. Mike Stern talks about transcribing a lot, and that hasn't kept him from being great. Learning solos by ear will also help just that, being able to pick things out by ear. It's something that as you get better and better at it, it becomes very rewarding. Also, I should mention that learning solos via tab is not transcribing. I'm not against tabs in general, and especially not when you're in a time crunch or you're learning something from a player who uses really quirky fingerings. That being said, taking the time to learn something by ear will benefit you so much more. So thanks very much for watching, and I'll see y'all next week.